Can you get Enduro Fit mid-season? Of course you can, but there's a few rules that you need to follow. So first of all, I'd say if you are a factory racer, which more than likely if you're watching this video, you probably aren't, and you are traveling a lot, racing every weekend, so like, let's say you're following the pro motocross over in America where you're racing most weekends and traveling a lot, then building fitness throughout the season is going to be quite hard just because you're doing a lot of traveling, getting to the races. The races is taking up 2 or 3 days, plus you might have travel either side. So you're going to find it very hard to be able to build throughout the season. But for everyone else who's not a factory rider, who isn't racing as much and isn't traveling as much, then yes, you can definitely build your enduro fitness throughout the season because you've got the time there. You just got to make sure you're allocating that time in the right areas, which is what we're going to go through. So things to focus on when you are mid-season and you know that your fitness needs to improve. So maybe you've started off the season and you thought things are okay and things are a bit harder than what you expected and you know that it needs work and you know that it needs to improve. This is what I'd focus on. So first thing would be better training over more training. So when you're mid-season and you've got racing coming up, obviously you want to feel great on the bike. You want to be getting on the bike and still performing well on race day. The last thing you want is to start your training and feel shit and feel worse when you get out there on race day. So you need to make sure that the training you are doing is the minimal effective dose for you to be able to make progress on the bike. Now is not the time to start training 6 days a week, twice a day, because you're going to end up flogging the shit out of yourself, running yourself into the ground, feeling worse on the bike, and then going, oh, I need to wait for the end of the season or wait for pre-season next year to get started with training. So next thing is keep recovery in mind, which builds on what I just spoke about. Because the last thing you want to do is start training and feel worse on the bike. And I see a lot of guys do that where they will just go, all right, I need to get fit. And they start cycling a whole heap and waking up early and then going to work and then training in the afternoons and going to bed later and they're not sleeping as well and their food's not on point because they've got no time to even get it sorted because they're trying to train and work and do everything else. And they end up feeling worse on the bike. They run themselves down rather than actually improving. And if you're putting all of that effort in, it can be frustrating because when you're putting effort in, you want to see progress. The last thing you want to see from putting effort in is staying in the same spot or even worse, which is going backwards. For big races, like if you have some big races that are sprinkled throughout the middle of the season and you want to perform well for them, in terms of tapering your training, what we do with our guys is we just get them to drop the volume off for 1 or 2 sessions before their before their race. So if they're racing on the weekend and they normally train, say, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Tuesday and Thursday, we just get them to back the volume off a little bit, back the intensity off, back the weight off a little bit. So they're still training. And then that's going to make sure that they're ready to rock and roll for the weekend. Last thing you want to do is be having shit tons of time off before the race and after the race. If that's how you're going to do things and you're going to take a whole heap of time off, weeks before a race and then weeks after a race, mid-season, then you're not going to get race fit mid-season because every time you have a race, you're going to have too much time off to even make progress. And you are going to feel sore all the time if you do that because anytime you start a new type of training or doing some type of training, there's going to be soreness within that initial week or two just because your body's not used to doing anything. So if you keep stop, start every time you've got a race, you're just going to feel sore the whole time, not make much progress the whole time, and then go, yeah, I need to start next season, not do this right now. Next thing is you need to be able to get out on longer rides when you aren't racing. So if you're racing, and let's say you're racing on average, once a month, right? So once every 4 or 5 weeks. On those other weekends, you need to make sure that you're getting out and doing longer rides to help you build fitness on the bike as well. So the training we do off the bike supports the skills on the bike. It supports the bike time. It doesn't replace the bike time. The training in the gym is not instead of riding, it's as well as. It helps to support all the skills that you already have on the bike. So, lost track of where I was going there. If you are planning to get out and do longer races, so let's say 3-hour enduros, then on your practice rides, you need to get out and also do 3-hour enduros. So get out and do longer rides. You can't just be getting out every weekend and going for 10 minutes, 20 minutes, or going out for half an hour and then having a rest with your mates and then another half an hour. You need to be practicing the length of time with your riding that you want to do when you go and race. So if you're in that 2 to 3 hour mark, do 2 to 3 hour rides when you go and practice, and that's going to allow you to be able to build the fitness you need between races rather than just trying to rely on what's happening in the gym. Why riders struggle to get fit mid-season. First of all, they got no strategy with their training. So they go, yeah, I'm trying to get fit, and then they just let everything get in the way. It's like, oh, this week's busy because I'm traveling to this race. Oh, I'm racing this weekend, so I'm not going to train this week. So, oh, this week's busy, and there's no plan, no strategy, no structure with how it's going to work. Mid-season is the busiest time of the year compared to, say, end of year, right? Or around Christmas time, where when it comes to riding, you're not as busy. There's not much racing happening. Things are a lot quieter. It's off season. We're getting ready for the next season. So mid-season, you are going to be quite busy. You're going to be getting bikes ready, you're going to be traveling, you're going to be getting to races, getting all of that sort of stuff sorted. So probably under a bit more stress, a bit more pressure than what you normally would be. So if you don't have a strategy with your training, you can't rely on yourself to just wing it and come up with it and go with the flow, because all of those other things are going to take over and you're not going to do the work that you need to do to be able to improve on the bike. The next thing is people think that to build the level of race fitness they need, that they need to train a lot more than what they actually do. So one of the common things, like with our guys, we work on 3 training sessions a week for 45 minutes each, give or take. Now, one of the things that we hear when we first start working with riders is, oh, okay, is that it? I thought I'd have to be doing a lot more. And the truth is you don't have to be doing a lot more, because we're doing the right stuff. The amount of hours of training that you do don't really matter. What matters is the stuff you're doing in that time. So if you're, like, for example, if you're trying to get good at motocross and you want to improve as a motocross racer, but you spend all of your time playing lawn bowls, then it doesn't matter how many hours of lawn bowls you do. You could spend every day doing lawn bowls, but that's not going to help you to be a better motocross racer, because it's not about the time you spent training, it's about what you did with the training time. That's the more important thing. It would be more beneficial to ride the motocross bike once a week than it would be to go and do lawn bowls 6 times a week, because you want to do the right stuff. And that's the same thing with your training and your workouts. It's not about doing hours and hours and hours of stuff. It's just about cutting out all the crap and focusing on the stuff that's actually going to help you with your racing. So to come back to that point is, a lot of riders think they need to do more training than what they actually do. So what happens is they end up flogging the shit out of themselves. They're trying to race, they're trying to get their bikes organized, they're trying to travel, they've got all of that stuff going on, trying to squeeze in, get their work time happening and get their work duties sorted so they can go and race in the first place. And then trying to squeeze all of this training on top of it, which means cutting out sleep time, cutting out recovery time, cutting out family time, all of this sort of stuff, which makes it harder to be able to get race fit. And then especially if you're doing the wrong stuff, then it's not going to be too effective on the bike anyway. So you just end up running yourself into the ground, you get sick more, you get injuries that you shouldn't be getting, and it makes things worse rather than actually making them better. The next thing is, they've got no plan for their training while they're racing or traveling. So it comes to the previous point I was just talking about, where a lot of riders think they need to have a whole heap of time off when it comes to racing. And that's the furthest thing from the truth. When you're racing and you've got a big race event coming up, taper the last 1 or 2 sessions, not 2 weeks, not 2 months before. We're not Olympians. We're not full-time athletes. Okay, you guys are just riding with work, with family, with other stuff that you do to help with your riding and racing. If you're training for 8 hours a day, then yeah, you can look at doing some of that stuff and cutting it back. But if you're only training 3 times a week, 4 times a week, and going riding on the weekends, then you don't need to be tapering for weeks and months. You need to taper for a session or 2. And that's the same after the race as well. Have 1 session, maybe 2 sessions after the race where you cut it back if you're feeling a bit sore and a bit fatigued, and then back to normal. So you're not losing any training time. And what that means is you can make progress with your training all year long. Rather than what most people do is they try and do like an off-season, pre-season where they build all this fitness and then just try and hang on to that fitness throughout the year. But you guys, and I say this in a respectful way, you're not full-time athletes. It's not like in the AFL, Australian Football League, where they're playing football every week and traveling all the time, where it's very hard to make progress during the week without being stiff and sore and hurting on the weekend and squeezing all of that other stuff in. You guys have plenty of time to be able to make it happen. And you're not competing every weekend. So plenty of recovery time there as well. And it comes to my last point. Yeah, riders thinking that they need to feel fresh all the time and be able to recover by taking time off. So the reason that doesn't work is the body has what's called the lymphatic system. Okay, so the lymphatic system pumps lymph around the body, and when our muscles are broken down or have damage, which happens when we exert them, push them through riding, through going to the gym, they release toxins into our body, which start means our body starts to swell a little bit, we feel stiff, sore, rigid. That lymphatic system works with muscular contraction. So what that means is our muscles have to be working in some degree, okay, for that lymphatic system to be working. If we are stationary, so for example, if I'm just sitting here doing nothing, that lymphatic system's not working very well because I'm not contracting my muscles. And that's what a lot of riders do, is they'll go and race and then they take weeks off training because they're like, oh, I'm sore, I'm stiff, I'm rigid. But it actually makes you more sore, stiff, rigid. It draws out the recovery process because that lymphatic system isn't working because you're not moving. So the best thing you can do after a race is to get back into training straight away, but just knock back the intensity, knock back the recovery, knock back the weights. If you normally do squats with 100 kilos, do it with 60 kilos. Okay, instead of doing 20 minutes of intervals, do 10 minutes of intervals. Just drop the volume back. And that will allow you to recover faster and keep up your momentum with training. And on the opposite side beforehand, people go, oh, well, I need to take all this time off so I feel fresh for race day. It's actually the opposite. If you take a whole heap of time off and do nothing, you're going to feel worse on the bike. And the reason you feel worse on the bike is your body becomes stiff and rigid. It starts to regress and detrain already. So if you've been training consistently, your body's used to training 3 times a week. It's used to using certain loads and doing certain movements. The week that you stop doing those things, you start to regress in strength. So you start to drop backwards. You start to feel more stiff. You feel more rigid because you're not getting into those positions and doing what your body's used to. So when you get on the bike, you don't feel as good as what you could if you had have kept training all the way up to the race and just tapering those last 1 or 2 sessions.